In 1960, Fornethy House in Angus was set up as a residential school to provide respite for girls from the Glasgow area. For those sent there on short-term breaks, it was meant to be a place of safety. But in recent years, hundreds of women have come forward to say they endured abuse there. Tonight we hear from one of the survivors. Violet Duffy was at Fornethy in 1970 and says that in addition to physical abuse from teachers, she was sexually assaulted. We can reveal the man who she accuses was being investigated by the police. And a warning, you could find details in Ollie Dickinson's report distressing.
On a bench by the sea, Violet Duffy has finally found peace. It's a lifetime away from the trauma she endured when she was sent to Fornethy House in Angus, aged just 11, in 1970. It was supposed to be a place for the girls to escape inner city Glasgow. Instead, Violet and hundreds of others were abused by some of the teachers and staff.
But it was all mostly frenzy attacks. They would hit you. They loved it. They thought it was like a game to them. Being that small and being punched in a way that a man would punch another man.
In October, this woman, Patricia Baxter, known then as Patricia Robertson, was found guilty of abuse charges against girls in her care at Fornethy, including Violet. She was the first to report abuse to police in 2017, but Violet also reported sexual abuse by a man who worked there. That man was George Howe, a former caretaker and gardener at Fornethy. Violet says he abused her the day before she was due to go home, after she had been to the tuck shop to buy chocolate as a gift for her mum.
I was so happy that I was going home. And I came out and George was in the corridor and he put out his arms and I ran to him. It was hurting me and he was squeezing me hard. And I said, George, you need to let me go, let me go. And he wouldn't. He let me go and I ran. I turned back to look at him and he was in the corridor in the same place, just smiling at me. I didn't know at the time that he had sexually abused me until I got older.
Violet has spent the last 5 decades trying to come to terms with what happened to her.
I knew if I told anybody, they would be so shocked because I was shocked. And I thought, this man wouldn't hurt me. And I was all confused after it. I didn't know why he'd hurt me. He knew I was crying. I was hitting him on the back to let me go because it was sore. And I just thought, nobody would believe me because I couldn't even believe it.
Violet isn't the only woman to make similar allegations against Mr. Howe. Investigating officers attempted to speak to him just 2 weeks before he died in 2020, and police now say they were pursuing further arrests and charges against former Fornethy staff who have since died.
There were a number of people who we would class as suspects who were identified by the victims as being responsible for abusive behaviour. There's about 5 that in detail sexual abuse. So yeah, it isn't large scale in respect of who've come forward to the police, but I have no doubts that there may well be, as we've talked about here, it was open for 30 odd years, Fornethy School, a big turnover of children, and I think we're just scratching at the surface the amount of people who have come forward to report the abuse.
It's been a painstaking investigation for police and a frustrating one for survivors. Violet was the first and only person to report her abuse in 2017. It wasn't until 3 years later that Police Scotland learned of the potentially hundreds of victims and launched a full-scale investigation.
A police investigation is a search for the truth. It's about, well, what went on at Fornethy, and we don't have any of the modern techniques to help us understand that. We don't have CCTV, computers to go and see things, that on there that might help us understand just general records about what happened at Fornethy. We didn't have any of that luxury. So it really was about digging into the detail of the statements provided by the victims who came forward.
Whilst that investigation secured the conviction of Patricia Baxter, for the survivors, there's a frustration that other abusers escaped justice through death. For Fornethy women, They're now left to consider what the next stage of justice for them might look like.
And if you've been affected by issues in Ollie's report, support is available. The STV website has details of organisations providing help and advice. More than 200 of the Fornethy House survivors are represented by Thompson solicitors. We discussed the wider campaign for justice and accountability with Laura Connor, who heads up the law firm's historic abuse unit. Laura Connor, hundreds of women suffered abuse at Fornethy House as girls. What will justice look like for them?
Well, there were indeed hundreds of girls who were abused at Fornethy, so I think justice for each one of them will look quite different. Many have already seen justice with the convictions over the past few months. We are continuing to pursue a number of civil cases which will bring further justice. We hope the Scottish Government will apologise for what has happened as well. So the justice takes many forms and will be different for every individual.
Because I've spoken to quite a lot of the survivors of abuse at Fornethy over the last few months and years, and some of them want an apology, some of them want redress.
Mm-hmm. That's it. So what each individual person wants and what justice looks like for them will be very different. I do hope the Scottish Government will follow through on what they have said and make the apology. I think it's very much deserved. We've heard a lot of evidence now about what happened at Fornethy. It's clear what went on there and what went on under the watch of Glasgow City Council's predecessors and therefore the local authority and the governments. And
the City Council has apologised already, but that doesn't seem to have satisfied so many of the campaigners.
No, I can understand why it hasn't. I agree with that. It was an apology of some sort which was made, but it wasn't an acknowledgement that they were abused by employees of Glasgow City Council's predecessors. It didn't follow through with an acknowledgement that they were going to settle the cases which are being pursued against them through the civil courts either.
And this has been going on, or the women who are affected by this, it starts in the 60s, doesn't it? It goes right up to the 90s, I think, for some of them even. Yeah, that's right, from the early 60s through to the 90s. So a significant number of young girls from Glasgow were sent to Fornethy, and now as women they are coming forward with their experiences. So for survivors, what does it mean when something like this gets to this stage where there are court cases and convictions? It's very important to them because their story is being heard, and although there were 25 complainers in the criminal trial and there were 18 convictions, those that were speaking through the course of that trial spoke on behalf of so many others as well. So stories were being heard that related to far more people than were involved in the criminal trial. So even although it just actually directly refers to a few individuals, out of the hundreds who have made complaints and who have said that they were abused, it actually has an impact on them all, does it? Yeah, very much so. And we could hear that when we were at the trial, and those that were in the gallery listening were becoming quite emotional at some points because they were hearing their childhood being told by someone else. So many of them share the same stories. Laura, thanks for joining us in Scotland Tonight.